Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Getting Back to Work in a Post-COVID World. I'm Kevin Iguano, I'll be your host. Today our speaker is Ori Schibi. Ori is a senior consultant with Procept Associates. He's an expert in change management, project management, business analysis, and a number of leadership-related topics. He's a fascinating speaker with a lot of lovely stories, author of lots of books. He teaches at York University. He's a very highly credentialed speaker. I think we're going to really enjoy him today. Go ahead, Ori. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Let's get on our way. Right, we're going to talk about four things here, four groups of things. First of all, with the coming back to the office or half coming back to the office or maybe, and then all sorts of hybrid ideas, there are going to be some side effects that are going to take place directly because of that, and also because of all the other events we are going through. So we're going to talk about those side effects. We are going to talk about what we should expect as a result, right? What we should see and hear around us, and then things that will inevitably need to change as a result. And this is where, of course, it connects to many things that we do, right? At Procept, helping organizations dealing with those things. And of course, we're going to have a few more additional thoughts toward the end. And then about at 1:45 Eastern time, I'm going to open up and do a little bit of questions if you have. Of course, feel free to type in questions at any point, and I will try to address them as I go. I'll try to keep that. Keep track of the chat. So first of all, let's talk about the growing side effects. And in order to keep you awake, I'm going to just incorporate a couple of polls along the way, right? I'm going to put now on the screen the first poll. Ask you, do you think that your organization is ready, right? And it's coming up, right? So is your organization ready for that comeback? And you have a few options over there. Not at all, somewhat, and we are ready, or we are already doing what we did before. So people are saying somewhat. Okay, I'm going to keep it for a few more seconds. Anybody else wants to vote? Yeah, we're at somewhat, right? Yeah, somewhat. Somewhat is it's a little bit of good, a little bit of not so good, because remember that it could go either way, right? So if we're not sure, it can go either way. So there are really three things that we should expect here. First of all, the post-corona social changes, right? And yeah, I'll call it unraveling of the fabric of society. So many things have changed, right? Our ability to interact with people and socially, and I'm not talking about kids and the elderly, right? But we haven't been, many of us, to the office pretty much for 2 years, and things will not be back to the way they were when coming back. Plus, of course, there's going to be the battle between those who say we should go back to the office, or those who say we should reduce a little bit the restrictions, as opposed to those who don't. And then the third factor is, yes, economic and geopolitical shocks, right? That all of a sudden there's been it's been very blurry, the line between what happens around the world and the news, right, in the general sense, and our personal lives. In the past, we could get by pretty well without watching the news and minding our own business, and all of a sudden now the news are just the realities, prices and everything are just affecting us, and it takes another toll on people. So what we should expect to see and hear as a result, right? A few things. First of all, it's already there, and it's going to come to fruition at work. There's going to be increased stress and anxiety, right? Also, the result of going back to the office and the commute and the need to get up in the morning and get dressed beyond just putting on a shirt, and this will have impact. Again, we're not talking about the solutions, we're talking about what we should expect. And the second thing, it's not as a result of coming back, but when you think about it, most of us used to spend a better part of our commutes, whether it was in a bus, on a train, or in a car, we used to spend it for reflection, thinking about what happened, thinking about what's going to happen, how people are this and how people are that around us, and we lost that. Now that our commute is from here to the kitchen, right, we really don't have time to reflect and think and process things properly. With commuting back, it's going to come back, but still, I mean, maybe it's not going to utilize that time the same way. The third thing is about personal challenges, right? With cost of living, again, all of a sudden, it's much more painful to actually drive to work, and public transit prices are going to go up probably, and everything else is going to go up, and it's going to affect us. Our wages and earnings are not keeping up with inflation, especially not these days. And then related is explosion of stress, right? And we're going to see more polarization and more aggressive conflict than we have seen. We've been seeing it already in our social circles, how people, friendships, and even families are divided, right, by all that noise around us. And of course, by differences in opinions. And this will not skip the office, right? We're still going to have those differences in the office that will directly impact our ability to function as teams and be productive. A little bit more expectations. We're going to see people becoming more territorial and more political in their behavior, right, as a result of all these realities around us, and more silos and territories, right? We're going to be able to, or try to protect our territories better. There is a major retirement wave among boomers, and in general, people are much less afraid to leave a workplace where they're not happy, or when they feel that there's too much work, and just moving somewhere else that offers them something more to their liking. So it's going to be harder to keep people and good people around. We are in Canada. I am located in the Toronto area, which according to some is the center of the universe. And there is a big brain drain, right? Many Canadians are, with means, are looking for opportunities to relocate for, again, geopolitical and financial reasons. And then there's increased awareness as a result of the pandemic, of course, of work-life balance. So many of us do not want to go back to that rat race that was really the trademark of our lives prior to the pandemic, and this will also impact what we should see at our workplaces. So now that we talked about expectations, I'm going to put another poll to see, let me just put it on, to see how do you feel about your level of readiness about coming back to the office. Again, I'm overall worse off, I can handle things, I'm better off, or how to say. I think I'm walking you too hard here because it's hard to say. So again, hard to say is equivalent to somewhat before, right? Which it's okay, but when it's hard to say, we got to start thinking what it is that is hard to say. Not necessarily now, but this is food for thought, right? What it is that we are struggling with, what it is that is making up those challenges, and then try to actually handle these challenges. Maybe I'm going to wait a couple more seconds for more people. This is the fire alarm. It's going to stop in just a second. I apologize for that. This is called also Murphy's Law. And stop. This is also called Murphy's Law. Sorry about that. Let's go back to the next section where we're going to talk about what needs to change, because things will need to change. This will need to change, that noise. So we're going to talk about four main areas. There's going to be some overlap, of course, and they're related to each other. One area is on the organizational level, more on the big picture view. One area is going to be related to what HR department's supposed to do. We're going to talk about, of course, the people and communications, and then the expertise, right? Project and change management. So before we actually go to these areas, I want to ask you, and you can put it in the chat, 1, 2, or 3. Which is the largest circle on the screen? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? This is hard to think about. Well, it's not a trick question. Kevin, is there a chat available? In any case, when I first saw these circles,
the chat window, sorry, the chat window is available to attendees.
Okay. Maybe some of them fell asleep. In any case, at the beginning, it looked like, well, for everybody, it looks like that middle one, number 2, is the largest circle, right? And then when you look at it, you say, hold on a second, is it the largest circle, or are we looking at being zoomed more or less, right? But then when you look at it carefully, you see that the pointy part of the circles of the 2 smaller ones is pointing counterclockwise, while the large circle is pointing clockwise. Why am I talking about it? Because politicians understood, and many organizations understood, that it's a lot to do with appearances more so than substance, and we have to realize that too, right? So we got to make sure that how we conduct ourselves is also not only the right thing, but also it comes across the right way, and we got to be able to filter when our colleagues and our organizations are acting in certain ways. Is it really for appearances, or is it really with substance? So the first thing, strategic and the organization. Here are a few factors, right, in no particular order, right? So first of all, once and for all, we have to remove the silos. I just pointed out that silos are a problem, and they're going to be a growing problem, right? All these territories and us versus them, even within the organization, and these things will need to soften up a little bit. From an organization perspective, also, maybe we need to start looking more into accountability. A few years ago, we did a project at a government organization here in Ontario, and when we pointed out, based on observation, that there were some accountability issues, many stakeholders came back to us and said, hold on a second, what do you mean by the word accountability? So the problem was much bigger. It wasn't necessarily that they didn't have the accountability, it was more that they didn't know what it was. Diane, I noticed that you have a question mark over there. Is there anything that you'd like to ask at that point? And you can actually use the chat window if you like in the meantime. So we will need to change accountabilities.
Excuse me, Diane was just saying that the chat functionality does not seem to be working, but the questions window is working. So they can maybe type their comments in the questions window.
Okay, fair enough, and thank you, Diane, for pointing that out. I'm going to go back to the slide. So compensation, right? We need to change the way we are being compensated, because it's not only about my performance in my project, it's also my being a good corporate citizen, essentially, by doing the right thing for the organization. Of course, the new hybrid model, it's not enough just to bring people to the office, again, whether it's space or distancing or whatnot. It's also about making sure that team members are coming into the office at the same time, on the same day of the week or days of the week, so they can actually interact. I hear a lot in many organizations that people say, well, I don't need my colleagues. I work alone very well. I'm uninterrupted at home. But we are social creatures after all. And for the most part, we forgot what it is to actually have those social interactions. Building resilience, we're going to talk a little bit more about what it means building resilience, but we are probably overall weaker in our ability to deal with multiple challenges, something that we need to look at. Capacity, prioritization, resource management. These are things that had been a big problem prior to the pandemic, and now they're going to continue to shine like that. Most people cannot actually articulate their own capacity. Yes, we have 24 hours in a day, and we have 8 hours of work or a little bit more. And how much value do you add? How much productivity do you produce? Because once you reach your capacity, it's time to prioritize. Instead of just trying to do so-and-so job on so many things, maybe we should try to focus on certain things more so than the others. It says here, candid lessons learned. We really have to improve on that. Agile introduced the notion of doing lessons learned periodically throughout the project at different stages. fairly frequently, so we can actually continuously improve on a small scale. But it has to be really meaningful set of lessons. It says here the 3 times because that's one, the process lessons. 2 is the product lessons. We got to have a better ability to look back at what we created. Usually it's called post-implementation review, but it's not done very often. And the 3rd type of lesson is something that is missing from large majority of organizations. It's a more strategic view of how we can really look back in a candid way at our initiatives and ask really 2 very important questions. Did we do the right thing? And did we use the right approach? This is not about blaming and finger pointing and whatnot. This is just about looking back with the power of hindsight and figure out, was it the right thing? Was it the right way? And then once again, the inevitable need for efficiency. Right? Remember, many organizations, when you tell them, let's be more efficient, for them, they are on autopilot to say, oh, efficient means let's just fire a bunch of people, call it workforce reduction, and then do more with less. That's not efficient. This is called reducing the workforce. Efficient means let's reduce some of the interruptions. This is not a topic for today, but talking about how much time is being wasted on a regular basis in meetings that shouldn't take place, in emails that shouldn't be sent, et cetera, et cetera. And I hate the term low-hanging fruit, but these are definitely low-hanging fruit. HR. Right, stuff that is related to HR. So first of all, yes, I know some people may not like that statement, but number one, we need HR departments to be focusing back on people. A short time ago, just before the pandemic, because my time stopped counting since, I attended with the Procept title shift an HR conference. I spoke there and we had a booth there. And it was quite puzzling to see that Procept was the only organization there that was actually doing leadership and project management, change management, and all sorts of things that can actually help people. All the other vendors that had a booth were payroll vendors, tools vendors, time reporting vendors, tracking your computer vendors, the whole privacy thing, right? And we really need HR to move back to its original intent of human resources, as in people. Again, we talked about hiring practices. We got to improve the way we look at candidates and really invest a little bit in understanding the fit that they have. Team building is going to start to come back because we will need to rebuild our teams, right? People forgot how it is to deal with other humans at work. And team building will come back. Also training. There's going to be a little bit of shift over there that we're already seeing, right? Less training for the sake of training, less generic, but more about areas that actually are strategically pointing at a struggle or as an actual need in the organization. And a lot is going to have to do with conflict management and leadership and how to handle change, right? And of course, the fundamentals of how to do proper requirements and projects and stuff like that. Employee support, meaningful employee support, right? On a regular basis, not only that support line that is outsourced, revealing the social skills, we touched on that, and then rules of engagement. I'm a big fan of establishing all sorts of norms in my working relationships with my teams, and this is very important, right? What to expect. It's almost like we're creating a path, quite a wide path of acceptable behavior, how to conduct yourself in meetings, how to conduct yourself in written, oral communication, stuff like that, informal stuff. This is not rules per se, this is more guidelines and norms, and it sets expectations and it reduces the amount of noise and misunderstandings. We just need to do it more on an organizational level. The third area is, of course, people and communications. We will need to not reshift, but not forget the fact that people are our strength. You remember many years ago, about 20 years ago, there used to be a company called the Fasco, they did steel, and they had a great slogan, right? Our product is steel and our strength is people. And we tend to forget about it because yes, we have data and we have numbers and we have automation and all these great things, but at the end of the day, our people are our strength. Number two, people want to feel empowered and people want to be able to feel that they can focus on work and not on distractions around us. Number three is distributed leadership. I have a whole page about it. We'll talk about it later. The fourth thing is a shift in the way that we communicate. We need to sharpen our communications. There's a lot of noise right now. We need to really reduce the amount of noise and focus more on the signal in the way we write, in the way we meet, and even in day-to-day communications, right? Less fillers, more substance, so we can manage our time better. Management style, less policing. We all want less policing, right? And guess what? Those people that were chasing after me at IKEA because they felt that my mask was not high enough on my fairly large nose, same behaviors will happen in the office, and we want to be empowered. We want to be able to work with each other as opposed to policing each other. And then number 6, improve focus on proper conflict management. Conflict management is not about emotions, and it's not about prevailing as in my way or the highway. It's an extension of leadership and communications. Conflict management is about identifying the situation, seeing the situation, identifying the most appropriate approach on how to deal with it. And of course, we have to incorporate cost benefit, right? There is going to be some cost associated with investing in understanding and collaborating and problem solving and achieving a win-win, because it's not only about a transaction, it's also about how we make the other side of the conflict feel about. And then, of course, project and change management. That thing on the right, when asked if they would want to work on a change or just to complain, 4 out of 5 people asked, do I need to make a choice, right? What's going on, right? We love to complain, I know that, and I know many people who do, right? But we really need to take some action in order to improve, because change happens galore, right? And if we look back 10 years ago, we said, oh, wow, there's a lot of change in our organization, and now it looks like a walk in the park, right? Change on steroids. So we will need to better understand the needs of the customer. There is something called voice of the customer that started to get some growth prior to the pandemic, and then of course the pandemic killed everything. Agile and other methodologies, they have to serve for a purpose instead of just saying, hey, let's be agile, right? And then we got to be able to measure, once again, cost benefits that we have. Sponsorship. I like project sponsorship. I like change sponsorship, not only because I wrote a book about it, because I've also done work with it. And in many organizations, there is a realization that we can have excellent team members and excellent project managers and excellent sponsors, but do the sponsors know how to sponsor? Do they know what to ask, what to look for, what to manage, what to measure? Most likely not, and most likely they're not sufficiently available for the needs of the project. So this is an area for improvement. Integrating change and project management. So that doesn't mean that the same person will do both, but those 2 silos must come together, because we see the growing push in those 2 areas that end up being conflicting to each other, instead of the project properly budgeting, right, what the change impact will be. Remember, change is about managing attitudes and training and communications, and these things have to be built into the project, and we got to have more coordination. Sustainment for change, right? We arrive at the end of the initiative drained, exhausted, most likely hating each other for the most part in many organizations. And guess what? Tomorrow we have to deal with something else, and tomorrow we have to make sure that the value and the benefits that we've achieved are going to be realized, right? So we don't slide back or oscillate, right, somewhere without realizing those benefits properly. We invested a lot in it, so we got to actually arrive in a stronger position at the new beginning at the end of our change. Number 6, new approach to problem solving and decision making. So at the time I did some work with the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know, that organization that maintains social distancing between themselves and the Stanley Cup. And it was great, but I did notice that the decision-making process there, like in many other organizations, was, should I say, lacking, slow, let's take a step back, afraid of making decisions. It's very common. And then the stakeholder that I was working with moved to another organization in the United States, Philadelphia 76ers, again, a sports and entertainment organization. And he told me heads up, and then I noticed that very quickly how the decision making there was different. So it's not necessarily the 49th parallel difference, but we got to improve our ability to make decisions. Again, these are the two polarizing views, right? The constant fear of making decisions versus let's just make a decision, and by the time one organization did not make any decision, the other one was making 10. Many of them were not right, but there were two brilliant ones. So we got to learn. Remember, if you're going to make a decision and you wait for the point where you have all the information that you need, it's too late. There's no such thing having all the information that we need. This is called risk management, right? So related to problem solving, and remember, not all decisions are going to be good, but we got to make sure that at least we make informed decisions based on the information that we have. And again, many people and organizations are in need to improve on that. And then fresh look at improving risk management and making peace with assumptions. So risk management, again, what could possibly go wrong that will prevent us from achieving what we need to do? We gotta learn and embrace the fact that risk is always present and to make informed decisions under that cloud of risk. And the second thing is making peace with assumptions, because we all know, I'm going to organizations and I ask, okay, who likes assumptions? And I get an overwhelming response. No, I hate assumptions. You know the urban definition of assumptions, making something out of you and me. But can you really make any plan without making assumptions? I mean, a few weeks ago, I drove to Sudbury, north of Toronto. Waze promised me it was going to take me 3.5 hours, but then the weather came and there were a whole bunch of flurries and heavy flurries and road closures, and I spent almost 5 hours on the way, right? But the assumption that I make the night before is that, well, I left enough time because it's me, right? But the assumption that I made the night before, and wake up at a certain time, and it's enough for me to leave and comfortably stop halfway through at Licks and grab a hamburger and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, the road was closed and snow and white out, and I ran out of windshield washer on the way. Anyway, I made assumptions. I put some buffer, but obviously they did not stand. So we got to realize assumptions are part of life. The way we treat them right now is that we ignore them and then they hit us. But remember, we document, we write it down, we manage the assumption by identifying what I need to know from where the information will come from, and I put an expiry date for the assumption. So for example, if I have to commute somewhere and it's an hour drive, and we say, okay, do I have the car? I need to know about an hour and a few minutes before. What happens to the assumption at that point? Either business as usual, here's your car, go ahead, or you don't have a car. And then it's either a risk or an issue, things that we are much better at managing than just assumptions. So yes, these two things, are we good at managing projects? Absolutely. Are we good at managing change? Well, we got to be able to bring those things together and further improve. There's no question about it. And it's time for another poll, right, in order to try to get you to get to see how you're feeling about stuff. And it's going to be the third poll. To what extent do you feel that the organization ready for the upcoming challenges? So it's not for the hybrid model, it's for the upcoming challenges that it's going to face. Worse than before, about the same, better than before? I don't know. Anyone else wants to add? Oh, okay. So 50% say worse, 50% say I'm not sure. Not the best answers, right? Yeah, I believe that for the most part, organizations are less prepared because we don't know what we don't know. The tremor that we're going to feel when people actually come back to the office is probably going to be a little bit larger than what we think, right? Thank you for doing this poll. I appreciate that. And then let's move on. couple of other things: leadership, distributed leadership, management, change management realities, right? Got to come back to that, and then a little bit about resilience. So first of all, when we talk about leadership, remember, leadership is, what is it? The most studied field in organizations and management, right? And yet it's the least understood, right? We cannot agree who a good leader is. And for some unknown reason, every time we use the word, hey, who's a good leader? We look for them in politics, which is the last place, right? Based on what we see. And it's hard for us to even articulate what makes a good leader. So first of all, the job of the leader is to take us through this magic zone in between boredom and anxiety. By the way, we are now about here, right? As far as anxiety, most of us, remember, anxiety is fear of the unknown. It's fear of looking outside, saying it's sunny outside, and saying, what if it starts raining, right? So we really got to start differentiating between fear of something tangible and meaningful versus anxiety, which is that constant worry that always almost paralyzes us. So the job of the leader is to take us in that middle path over there. But also, well, because I didn't want to be too lazy, so I went to Forbes. I picked up a long time ago 8 essential qualities to define leadership, but then I added a couple more because I do have an MBA after all, and thank you for those who helped me get it. So 8 things from Forbes: sincere enthusiasm, right? Because if the leaders don't care, it's not good. Integrity. I don't think I need to explain that, but many people actually need explanation about it. Great communication skills. Remember, establish two-way communication, balanced and based on fairness and on ensuring that the feedback loop is open. It's not just enough to have the communications going in one direction, right? It has to be both ways. Loyalty. Decisiveness, not rushing into decisions, not hasty decisions, but the ability to make decisions, sometimes less popular, right? But again, in the test of time, we're going to see that these decisions are the right ones. We need managerial competence, so it's less and less about either or, right? We need to be a good manager and a good leader. Empowerment. Remember, people want to feel part of the solution. People want to be included. People want to be heard. Even if you don't take my view, right? It's important for people to feel heard. And charisma. Obviously, not only charisma, that's an empty suit, right? We need to have all those things. And then I said, okay, there are a few more things. Respect, right? Doesn't matter the reporting lines. Provide genuine support for people and showing them that we are there for them. The job of the leader is to engage and to unify, not to divide, right? So even if I do not agree with someone, I want to hear them. I want to engage. I may tell them that I don't agree, but my job is to get the conversation going and bring them in, as opposed to marginalize people and groups, right? So we have a few things here that probably, if we can check mark next to them, we can say, that probably makes a good leader. So that's that. The second topic, it's also sort of an eye test, right? That I'm making the font smaller so you can just zoom in a little bit. There's something called distributed leadership. It's been going on for a while, but then now with the distributed work environments and the hybrid work environments, it's starting to be a little bit more relevant, right? Distributed leadership is the way it sounds. It's about distributing part of our authority and part of our leadership, even traits, to those around us, not randomly, not blindly, but strategically, right? So we established that, first of all, we got to be an effective manager, but it's about sharing, right? The leadership, should I say, duties, right? We got to reduce a little bit the distinction between, are you a people-oriented person or a task-oriented person? Because I'm a big believer that if I focus on my people, they will probably perform the tasks better, right? Not too much on the people, because then it becomes a country club. On the other hand, don't focus too much on the task, because then it becomes quite unpleasant. We talked about problem solving. We talked about slicing things into smaller, more manageable pieces. So I like that. right? First of all, the essence of project management is like that, but then I had a professor years ago, and she really made a very interesting distinction between the words complex and complicated. Not a grammatical distinction, but rather practical. And she said, complicated, well, project management actually, it's like walking into a cockpit in an airplane. You walk in, tons of switches and knobs and screens and things, right? Very overwhelming, but every item there serves for a very, very specific reason, and we can learn it. It doesn't mean we may know how to fly a plane, but we can learn it. Every single item is actually very simple. You do this and it does that. You do that and it does something else. But complex is about a situation that cannot be broken down, right? So the complicated, yes, a whole bunch of simple things make a big mountain to climb. But the complex is that you cannot break things down to components. For example, mayonnaise, right? When you eat mayonnaise, right, it's made out of all sorts of ingredients, right? But when you make mayo, you mix those ingredients and they essentially bond with each other, and you cannot actually break it down. And by the way, if you see the mayo broken down to its ingredients, probably stay away. But that's the essence. By the way, raising kids, right? How do you have two kids, same home, brought up by the same parents, born by supposing the same parents, and they're so different from each other, right? Because that's the magic. Communications, people. So at work too, I cannot come to any one of you now and ask you a question. Hey, take Corona and gas prices out of your life and tell me how you really feel. You cannot isolate that, right? It's all together, it's all everything. So when you walk into the elevator, you know, that thing that takes us up in the office, and your colleague doesn't tell you good morning, it's not necessarily only because of you, right? There may be other things that cause them to be unhappy or distracted today. How do you break down the complex? Well, all these things that we've been talking about, but breaking down the complex is understanding the context. It's breaking those pieces of mayo to smaller pieces. So not isolating from each other, but essentially, remember, like we said before, we're not sure, or there's a whole bunch of things. Let's name those things and let's deal with these things one at a time, taking into account the impact that they're going to have on each other, right? So it still helps when we deal with change, when we deal with projects, when we deal with people, to take a look at the situation and say, can I break it down to smaller, simple pieces? Or I cannot, and then I will treat it as a complex thing accordingly. Generally, I can keep reading this, but I think you can also put some magnifying glasses and read those things too. Properly empower and maintain mechanisms for checks, balances, and feedback, right? So distributed leadership is that I can no longer afford, from a capacity perspective, to be the leader, even if I am. I need to actually empower others around me to participate in that. The next thing, I had to go back to change management. Everybody's talking about change, but there are a couple of things we got to keep in mind. First of all, a few pieces of truth about change. Change is hard, long, and expensive, right? If somebody comes and tells you change is easy, cheap, and quick, just run, right? Because it's probably not going to be the case. By the way, remember, for the most part, people don't resist the change, they resist the pain associated with it. And of course, they resist the fact that they have to move away from their status quo, which is fairly convenient. Also, there are a few challenges we got to keep in mind. First of all, not properly framing the change. We tend to be overly optimistic that it's going to be smaller and it's not going to be reaching other parts of the organization. Lacking vision, right? Vision is the driver. Remember, it's like a North Star that we sail toward it, right? It's not going to be straight line, but we got to keep that in mind. So when we have trials and tribulations, we remember the direction we're going. We fail to establish the cost for not changing. Remember, sometimes there's going to be a cost associated. Okay, the change is not good enough and it's not appealing enough. It's too painful. But at the same time, what's going to happen if we don't change? Keep in mind that this change is only one of many, right? And they're all intertwined with each other, and we're also confused and discombobulated as a result. We're often not ready. Remember, when you leave home in the morning, you know what you need to take with you, almost on autopilot. It's a readiness assessment, but as organizations, we really don't check, do we have what it takes? Not only budget and approvals and permissions. Do we have the team? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the resources? Do we have the understanding of the sense of urgency, right? Remember, we tend to confuse readiness with need, right? We need to change doesn't mean that we have what it takes to do it. And of course, we touched about before failure to sustain, right? We finished the change and said, oh, great, we move on to the next thing, and that new product or service or whatever we produced is just floating there, and we are not realizing the benefits, or even we are losing some of the potential benefits. And then, of course, how do we build resilience, right? How do we get stronger, right? So first of all, the attitude. The attitude talks about having a more consistent sense of urgency, right? So there's a direction. Understand the big picture and the context, right? Why are we doing things? Remember, we go to places, for example, like Starbucks, right? Atrocious coffee, expensive, takes forever. They mispronounce your name, but we still go there, right? Why? Well, there is a why behind it. We like that smell of coffee at the end of the day, and we like to put that logo in front of the Instagram, right? But, well, some people. But there's a why. Starbucks doesn't tell you, hey, come here, we have better coffee. Starbucks doesn't tell you, come here, and we're going to call you by your right name, right? And you'll be surprised what people can do with the name Ori, right? And Starbucks doesn't tell you it's going to be cheaper because it's outrageous, but still, we still go there because there is a why there. So this is part of resilience. Of course, I can't stop talking about capacity and prioritization, right? Understanding where we are, and then we can actually decide what we do first, what we do later. Talk about the initiative and the organization, big picture, interlocking initiatives, right? It's not done in a silo. Of course, the need to bring innovation and creativity. Remember, creativity is not only artistic. Creativity is also about getting people to think outside the box, getting people to think about alternatives. And then, of course, communication and collaboration. These are the things, right? These are the things that happen on a day-to-day, right? How we make people feel, how we interact, how we work with each other, and of course, it's much greater power as a team. So I think that that's going to be the time for our fourth poll, or I think we did the fourth poll. No, here's the fourth poll. What is the main area of concern, if there is one main area that you have about going back to the office, if and when, or when and if? The commute, the workload, dealing with other humans, or again, back to time management and work-life balance? Which one is it? I'm just going to launch it. Time management, work-life balance. Remember, it has been very convenient that our commute was from the kitchen to our desk, right? And all of a sudden there's train and car, right? So again, the first and the last one, let's see a little bit more of a split, right? But yes, that commute, right? And whether it's driving and the time it takes, or whether it's the need to see other humans along the way, right? Excellent. All right, thank you for that. But yeah, time management, I think this is the overall the first concern, not the only one. Thank you so much for that. All right, so we are reaching that point that I want to open up for some questions. But remember, one of my favorite, well, not only people, but one of my favorite quotes is what Deming said. It's not necessary to change because survival is not mandatory, right? The reality changes, the world changes, society changes, and organizations also need to change. Not necessarily all the same way, in a consistent way, but we got to pay a little bit more attention to the way we actually do things, because it's not that we haven't been doing things or haven't been doing them well, but in so many environments, the success that is achieved at the end is not thanks to the processes and the support and the leadership and what the organization gave us, But more so, despite all that, it's thanks to the great people that work in our teams that manage to somehow pull superhuman capabilities and pull this thing together against all odds. Good news, excellent. Bad news, we are now setting up the stage. Next time they're going to say, oh, we do not need to provide them with what they need. We do not need to provide support. We just have a few Superman, Wonder Women over there that will actually pull it together for us. So by us excelling at what we do, at the end of the day, we are actually sending the wrong message. So at this point, chat is not working, questions are working. We have a few minutes that will allow us to ask some questions. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Ori. Excellent, great presentation. Okay, everybody, please type your questions into the questions window. You'll see that on your web interface. For those of you viewing this recording later, as a video recording, you won't have a chance to ask live questions. Okay, please type your questions into the questions window. Okay. First question, what do I do if I'm scared to return to work and I'm being forced?
Just call me and I'll explain to you. Remember, we got to break down things. We got to think scared of what? Again, is it scared of the interactions? Is it scared of the stress? Is it scared of people or getting infected? So we have choices. Most workplaces are still going to continue to maintain proper social distancing. And now we all have responsibilities about personal hygiene, washing our hands. People still have the choice. Remember, the fact that they tell us not to wear masks anymore doesn't mean that we don't have the choice to wear masks anymore. Now, we got to act professionally. If somebody chooses to wear masks, it's their right. I'm not managing their lives, right? I'm not going to tell them you're doing the wrong thing if this is their choice, right?
There's another question from Elena. Effective management approaches when the team is constantly divided between office and remote. So I guess Elena's looking, what are the effective management approaches when the team is distributed between some people on site and some people at home?
So first of all, we talked about the hybrid model and we talked about distributed leadership, right? So the hybrid model is that, first of all, it may not be possible to bring everyone to the office because just like before the pandemic, we may have people located in different parts of the town, country, or the world. So we can bring them in. But if we have the option, we got to set up, number one, the ability to come into the office as much as possible all at the same day, not the entire organization, the entire team, and then stagger. And number two, agree on all sorts of frameworks, for example, business hours or working hours, when we should expect to actually see each other online, and then agree on turnaround times for communications. The problem of distributed teams had been prior to the pandemic. Now it became the major way of doing things, but a little bit more framework related to coordination of attending the office, and of course, distributed leadership, right? Giving pieces of the managerial and the leadership aspects to team members who will become in turn they will become more conforming and they will own those pieces with proper delegation. Hope it answers your question, Ellen.
Excellent, thank you. There's another question from Sylvie. Sylvie says, I believe there's a huge difference between proper change management that we are being prepared for as opposed to this COVID-19 changes just being dumped onto us. What do you think?
Well, the COVID-19 was dumped, all right. Remember, in the first 15 days to slow something down, we were all conforming and we were all doing our best to work remotely. And then when it started getting extended, came the challenges. So yes, we talked about the blurring of the lines between the general, what happens in reality and socioeconomic stuff, and our lives, that all of a sudden it completely infiltrated our lives. The second, we talked about resilience. We talked about proper change management. Remember, the large majority of change management guidance that is out there, we'll talk about, okay, here's the change. You start here, status quo. You go through this curve. You see that curve on the blue cover of the book, and then you come out much better, right? In reality, number one, we go through different depth and different length and different stages of this curve. Number two, the biggest flaw in that, it's not the only change we are going through. We got to be able to take a look. Remember, we said capacity management. The organization has to take a look and say, do we have what it takes to take upon another change? And if another change is imposed on us, maybe we should make tough choices and call off a different initiative in order to allow capacity. Capacity is the biggest problem. We are all much more overworked than we were a few years ago, right? Well, for the same pay. I'm not rebelling or anything or calling for rebellion, but it's a reality, right? So yes, the huge difference, but better handling change, better handling projects. Remember, it starts on a day-to-day basis, and on a day-to-day basis, we need to become more efficient, more collaborative, more organized, right? And it will add up to a big picture. Imagine if you just improve a little bit, a couple of practices in something as trivial as those endless, useless meetings that we have in most organizations, and you reduce just the number of people, shorter meetings, 1 or 2 less meetings overall. Imagine if you added 15 minutes per day per person in your team in availability. That's an hour per week. What could you possibly be doing with an hour per week? I mean, you can go to Starbucks and that's 2 visits, right? But still, those little things, it starts with the small things and they will make a huge difference over time.
Excellent. Next question from Abdul. Abdul says there's so many people that never came back to work when we reopened because they were unvaccinated or found other jobs. How do we cope with the increased workload of trying to do 2 jobs all by 1 person?
You start with capacity management. You need to point out your capacity. You need to show what it is that your time goes toward, and then it's going to be easier for you to manage that, and it's going to be easier for you to build a business case. Again, you don't go to your manager and say, I can't do my job. You go to your manager and essentially there's a balloon over there, right? With what you need to do, scope and time and cost and quality. And these things, it's a balloon because these things compete with each other. And when you press on the balloon on one side, something's got to give. So you tell your manager, look, that's what I need to do. And I don't have more time or more resources to do it. And I don't want quality to suffer, right? So what can we do, right? Nobody drives with their eyes open into the wall, right? But if our leadership doesn't know that we need more capacity, they will keep pushing, right? So it's not a pushback. It's really done in a very constructive way. And then we have time for one more. Do you attribute the forced reflection, this forced reflection time that we had being responsible for the massive resignation? Well, I think that many people just realize that they don't want to deal with all that corporate labyrinth of politics and relationships and stuff like that. They got an opportunity, right? People also realized work-life balance, pandemic, and all of a sudden we realized, remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we discovered that there are parks in our neighborhoods, and we realized that there are neighbors that are actually also humans, and the kids and bicycles and stuff like that. So just more work-life balance. And also the bar went down for people to think, okay, you know what, I'm not happy here. I might as well, speaking of change, take the risk and go to a different organization and try to do better over there, right? People are less afraid of doing it now, and they're less afraid of admitting, I want more life-work balance. That is less work, more life, right? So the choices are being made.
Definitely, we have quite a few more people who've been able to start their own businesses, start small businesses as they've reevaluated what they'd like to do. Very good. Well, we're pretty much out of time. Thank you very much, Ori. This has been a great presentation. I'm sure we learned a lot. Anybody, if you want to get a hold of Ori, you can reach him at oschibi@pmconnectors.com. That's connectors with a K. It's on the screen. oschibi@pmconnectors.com.
Sorry, Kevin, I will add a couple of things. You can find me also through Procept.com, and you can find me also on LinkedIn, right? There's only one of me because, as you know, there used to be other people with that name, and I took them out. So if you type it, it'll be there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending this event. We do want to remind you of one other event that we have coming up. It's a free event. It's not just a 1-hour webinar. It is a half-day event on April 7th, 2022. Look to the Women in Project Management online event. It's a growing profession, lots of career opportunities for those looking to make a change, and the career can definitely use more women entering the profession. So we're trying to foster that by having some of the world's best female project managers come onto the online event and share their experiences and what the secrets were that helped them succeed in their career. Look for more information at womeninpm.ca. Thank you very much, Ori. You have a great day.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Thank you for joining.
Right. Goodbye, everybody.